Hello and welcome to Some of My Friends Read Comics. Today we have an episode dedicated to Stan Lee, reading some of his origin issues from back in the day, and we are continuing our read of Secret Wars with issue number 3. The friends joining me today, we've got Vince.
Hey, it's Vince, and I'll see it to you that you're always happy, but the rest of the world can hang for all I care.
Holy shit, we've got Chris.
Whirling into a shadowy dimension full of silence.
Great, and I'm Kia. Hi, welcome to the show. We went dark there. Oh my god, the rest of the world can hang. A shadowy. Wait a minute, is that line from Avengers? All right,
my line was Peter Parker, our noted everyman hero.
Well, he's a good man, a very good man. That Peter Parker. I
say he's a nerd.
He's an incel. He's an incel, if I ever saw one.
Yeah, he's definitely an incel. Poor guy. I shouldn't say, but like I had this view of incels that it's like, oh, you know, it's just like it's too bad. But I guess that's like become a thing now. Where is this like politically associated with right wing politics? This is the show where we talk about politics.
Some of my friends hate Nazis.
What are incels exactly?
Involuntary celibates because no women will fuck me.
Right, and
I'm
so they're
just a nice
like,
guy, even though like I'm mean to everybody.
Use that to turn on liberals, exactly. Yeah. Mm-hmm. How weird! What a world we live in. And now, unfortunately, that terrible world is made even worse because Stan Lee is no longer a part of it. How do you like that segue? God, I hate myself a little bit.
Stan Lee would love it. He was quite the showboat and quite the marketer. He would love it.
You're right. He really was. We owe so much to Stan Lee for essentially creating this entire Marvel universe along with the artists. I know. Yeah, it's co-created. Yeah. But you can't deny that a lot of those ideas, a lot of the words came from him. We would not have what we have if it wasn't for him. And we thought we'd honor his memory by reading a few of his old number ones, or number 15s, I guess. We're reading Fantastic Four number 1, which was the first appearance of, can you guess it? The Fantastic Four. We're reading Amazing Fantasy number 15, which was the first appearance of, can you guess it? Amazing Fantasy. No, I mean Spider-Man. We're reading Avengers number 1, which was the first time the whole supergroup was put together. The Backstreet Boys of Marvel, if you will. Or the NSYNC, I guess. Well, Backstreet Boys came first. I guess that counts.
Well, now the Backstreet's more of the JLA. I guess JLA is more... JLA is more like New Kids on the Block, I guess, but you know.
Okay, that's fair. Yeah. So if the JLA is like the New Kids on the Block...
X-Men's more like... Backstreet Boys.
Oh, okay. Because they were, and then, okay, and then, the Avengers could be like an NSYNC. I'm down with that.
Or more.
So who's Justin Timberlake? Is it Captain America or Iron Man?
Ooh, I don't know. Or they could be like that. What was it? What was the group that was all American Idol contestants? And then Simon Cowell's like, why don't y'all just all be a band instead of the individual? I can't remember where they were now.
O-Town?
I was going to say there was O-Town, but that wasn't American Idol.
Yeah, it was like mid 2000s. I don't know what they are anymore.
Is it MTV's Together?
Oh, number 2 GETHER?
Yeah, that's the one.
No.
You and me forever. I know my calculus. Okay.
So these books come from 61, 62, and 63.
Is that it? For some reason, I thought Avengers was 67. Am I making that up?
No, that's way off.
Okay, yeah. I guess I'm dumb. 61 was, okay.
That was right. Fantastic Four.
61. And then 1962 was Amazing Fantasy number 15. Oddly enough, the only issue of Amazing Fantasy.
Yeah. Number 15. Because they were originally, so we'll go into the history of this. So originally the book was called Amazing Adult Fantasy.
All those like weird little pulpy stories for grown-ups, right?
But it was trying to distinguish itself specifically because Stan Lee said that a lot of the comic writers of the time, and artists, you know, comic creators, they knew they were writing for children, so they didn't really give a shit about what they were writing. And so their dark secret was that like, oh, we're writing for like 8-year-olds. So this was to distinguish it from the market was Amazing Adult Fantasy. But then like they were like, fuck it, it's the last issue, who cares? And that's how Amazing Fantasy came to play. So specifically, I was reading, and so a lot of my information comes from the Origins of Marvel Comics book from 1974, written by Stan Lee, which I was given by my grandmother remarried in the early 90s, and I got all of her new husband's son's old comic books. So I have this like collection that's got like the first issue of every single Marvel comic, and it's got like it's got about 5 pages written by Stan Lee leading into each one. So we can talk a little bit about Stan the Man's history, as written by him in his words, 1974. So he acknowledges that he's like a showboat. So basically, he started working at Timely Comics, which got renamed to be Marvel Comics. He started working for them in 1939 when he was 17 years old. His boss was Jack Kirby, because Jack Kirby was hot shit because he created Captain America. I know the timelines are a little off here, but and Kirby had left and then come back around the late 50s, early 60s. And I think Martin Goodman was his name, was the kind of editor-in-chief or high up in Marvel. And he was like, the best book selling now.
He was the publisher, yeah.
Okay, so kind of was that Dan Buckley or Tom Brevoort right now? Something like that. But he was like, man, Justice League of America is selling really good at National Comics. That's now DC. And he's like, we should probably have a superhero book. And Stan Lee was like, okay, well, we can do this. And we're going to put our best artist on it, Jack Kirby. And he was like, one of the cool concepts of the Fantastic Four is that they didn't have secret identities. And this was kind of a big deal and kind of a watershed moment for comics, because no other superhero comics didn't have secret identities. And Stan writes in this thing, is like, if I had a superpower, I would tell everybody, because I'm too much of a showboat not to. Literal words from the book. So I'm like, that makes sense to me. It is funny because he writes in this thing, he goes, the great thing about me and Jack Kirby is that I could just come up with an idea, and then Jack would write all of it, put all the pages, all the panels together, and then I'd write words over it. It was a really good working relationship. And I'm like, sounds like Jack did everything, but okay.
Yeah.
And that's his version of events is I didn't do anything except the idea, which even in his version is, it's my idea. And then he did all the legwork.
That's fair.
But
I still give credit to the idea, though. I think it's a great idea.
Yeah, so, but in Jack's version, he's like, it was actually my idea.
Yeah, and you can kind of tell, like, I mean, I wasn't ever really paying attention to who was writing these things, because, like, in the liner notes and on the front of the book, it says by Stan Lee. And, like, if you look at the Library of Congress stuff, it says this whole thing is by Stan Lee. But every single first issue that's in my book, which is Hulk, Incredible Hulk, Fantastic Four, and then there's a sequel, Son of Origins of Marvel Comics, which has, like, Avengers and Journey into Mystery Thor. And I'm like, all these are Jack Kirby. All of these are Jack Kirby art. Yeah. So can't understate how important Jack Kirby was to this. For sure. But this is definitely like the beginning of Marvel's superhero run. So I would say, like, just chronologically, it looks like Fantastic Four was their first superhero book, and then Incredible Hulk was their next one, and then it was Spider-Man. In about a year span. So we can talk about Fantastic Four, number one.
Yeah, let's jump into it. I mean, what is there to say about Fantastic Four number one that hasn't already been said?
I think it's still a stellar book, though.
It does. Oh, all three of these, like, they move so quickly, and a lot of stuff happens, and it's just kind of like fun to see him gushing over, like, look what I can do, like, whoa, look at this power now, like,
well, yeah,
Well,
because I got this book, and my grandmother remarried when I was like 8, so I didn't know anything about these characters. I knew about Batman because of the movies, but I didn't really watch the X-Men cartoon, and so I knew no Marvel characters. So Fantastic Four was the first one in the book, and so I read this. I read this
watching
cold.
The X-Men cartoon?
No.
What are you doing?
I played the X-Men video game, but that was pretty much the extent of it, and it was such serialized that if I missed an episode, I really wasn't like. I think I was trying to pay attention. Maybe, I don't know. It just maybe I liked Wolverine. I liked the concept, but I didn't watch the show at all. But Fantastic Four, I went into completely cold, and I was like enraptured by it. Because the first, it's like how these comics were back then. They're broken into like 3 or 4 segments, like chapters. And the first segment is a signal's been flashed in the air by, I guess, Mr. Fantastic, but it's not really clear at that point. And then Invisible Girl, like, just like, all 3 of the other Fantastic Four are just like introduced, each using their powers to like unite. And Invisible Girl's,
all busy doing their own thing. Like, Thing is out shopping or whatever, and he's got his big cloak on.
Which literally invents the trench coat over your costume, which the Ninja Turtles famously in movie form.
Really?
That's the, I think in movies the first time we see that is who does that in the movies?
Raphael,
Raphael does it in the movies for the first time.
Oh, and the X-Men love doing it.
But it's the Thing in the comics invents this concept.
Wow. Good job, Thing.
So interesting thing about that, I started reading on the Marvel Unlimited app, and I noticed that the Thing's trunks were not blue, but they were like maroon. Which I don't know if y'all noticed that, and you guys just reread. I'm like, they're not like matching their colors, and they don't even have their costumes in this first issue at all. But the Thing, he's in maroon. But then I went back to read my Origins of Marvel Comics book just to brush up, and the Thing was wearing blue, which I guess they must have recolored it for the 1974 republication.
Wow.
How weird. Why?
Fuck if I know, but somebody fucking did. This is some of my friends read comics exclusive.
That, like, to distinguish that they haven't had their costumes made yet, you know?
Yeah. Well, and Stan was talking about, he's like, man, they wouldn't have time to get in a costume, because Stan and Jack tried to think like, critically about like what would real world superheroes be like. Their identities wouldn't exist. They wouldn't go in a costume because what's the point? They'd just be in their daily clothes, which I thought was interesting that concept kind of got abandoned. But at the very outright, they very much had that. And I thought that was cool. I also love Invisible Girl's intro. She's like out with a friend, and then she sees the signal, and she just turns invisible and just leaves her friend, and then hops into an empty cab. She's like, I ain't paying for cab. Like at first, I'm like, she's not gonna.
Yeah, that cabbie, that was
like,
great.
She hops into an empty cab, and then the cab driver drives her to where she needs to be, and then she just gives him the money. And I'm like, well, you didn't need to do that, Invisible Girl. You could have just been like normal. Like you didn't have to go into powers and be like surreptitious.
Yeah. Yeah, your powers were useless for this.
It made things harder for you, actually.
And so the people are like upset with the Thing, and the Thing's like, oh, I got to go do this. And he's like, it's so hard to get through doors, so he just broke through the doorway. And I'm like, how did you get into this place first that you had to break through the doorway? And then he's like, he decides to be stealthy, so he goes like into the sewers, and then he's like, this is taking too long. And so he just bursts through the ground to get back up there, which is like me playing like a stealth video game. He's like, this is stupid.
Yeah,
I'm done with this.
Shit. Let's do it.
Let's just get into the action.
Oh, man.
And then Kia...
maybe it's one of those deals where they have like a front entrance that's like a double door that's like 12 feet tall. So he can go in through those doors, but then their side entrance is like 6 feet tall, and he's like, I can't go through these.
Well, at least Johnny uses his powers, right?
Yeah, so Johnny
doesn't harm anything.
Johnny's getting like his car fixed, and he's like, "There's only the one thing I like more than cars," and you're like thinking like, "Oh, this guy likes girls, right?" And then he's like, "No, I like being fiery," and he melts his car that was getting fixed. If he loves,
he melts out of it and flies away. Why would you do that? Why would you do that to yourself?
So he does that, and then the military is like, within like 5 minutes of this, the military is like, what's this flying thing? Let's deploy a nuke over a city. Like within 5 minutes, they're already like, it's time for nukes. They came one rolling up with nukes, and two like didn't question, like, let's shoot a nuke over the city. And you're like, well, this book is called Fantastic Four. We haven't seen the fourth person yet. Or we saw him like at the very beginning saying like, I've shut off my signal. So who's this fourth person? And you just see like a long extended pair of arms just grab the bomb. And this is key. I think me and you read this like 10 years ago. And this 2-panel segment just cracks me up because it's actually like spread over 2 pages, so it's really 3 panels. But it's like, oh no, it's a nuke. And then long arms grab the nuke, and it says, got it. And you're like, what are these long arms? Who are these? And then the next one it says, moving with dazzling speed, one of the incredible arms hurls the mighty missile far from shore, where it explodes harmlessly over the sea. Because that's not how you make Godzilla or anything. But...
Yeah, I don't think it's a nuke. I don't know.
No. It literally says it's nuclear. The panel before that.
Yeah, but that doesn't mean it's a nuke. It's nuclear powered.
Canonical. So then we're like, who the fuck are these people? What's going on? And so they say, all right, let's go flashback to a few days ago or whenever ago.
That's a pretty cool intro, though. I like that. Let's show all their powers. We know all their powers, and then we'll do an intro.
Yeah, I love that they did that. And they go into the whole test flight thing. Pretty much what we've seen in every. How many Fantastic Four origin movies have there been? I guess 2.
Yeah, plus the Corman one, and then the cartoon, and Ultimate Fantastic Four did a comic. I mean,
say just like we've seen all the time, but I don't think I've actually seen any sort of a filmed or cartoon version of the Fantastic Four's origin. I never saw any of the movies.
I saw the first.
They all suck.
Yeah, I kind of just take it for granted that people know how the Fantastic Four got their origin. But how do I know? I guess from reading this stuff and just knowing.
Yeah,
weird.
I mean, from listening to podcasts like mine, explain.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So,
because we did the Roger Corman version,
which secretly might be the best Fantastic Four.
Yeah, it's
not a high bar.
In some ways, the most accurate, which is scary.
Oh boy.
But I mean. What's weird about this one is because I'm more familiar with like the Ultimate Fantastic Four movie or comic books origin, which is like they're like they have a staff and then like an accident goes wrong and Doctor Doom is there and all this kind of like stuff and they which I think is kind of borrowed for the 2015 movie. Mm-hmm. But this one's weird. It's just like, well, we got to go right now. Why do we got to go right now? Why can't we just do this like another time? Like, no, we got to beat the commies. We're gonna sneak on to our crew. We're gonna steal this spaceship and we're doing this experiment right now. Why are we bringing Ben Grimm? He's not even a scientist. Don't even worry about it. Let's just keep going.
He's the pilot.
Yeah, why is this 17-year-old going with us? Because my fiance is going too, and so her brother has to go.
Yeah,
it made a lot more sense when I was 8. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. And all these monsters they run into, man. All right, so they get their powers, and then they got to go after the Mole Man.
Yeah, that's Act 3.
Which I just kind of like tapped out of. I was like, oh, this is boring.
Really? I love these monsters, man.
I like the design of them, but I don't like the story.
Yeah. You're right. The story does get a little whatever, but it is also, you got to remember, first time seeing them, and so it's like that excitement of how can this person use their powers, and how can that person use their powers.
Yeah,
and
that's true.
I think it is so funny that at this stage, Invisible Girl is the weakest of the bunch before she became Invisible Woman, and before Stan Lee was like, all right, I got to give her some more powers. How about some invisible force fields, huh? And then as they keep on exploring the invisible force fields, she ends up becoming essentially the strongest member of the Fantastic Four, because that's like a kind of crazy power to have.
I was going to say, did Stan Lee even do that? I don't even know.
I feel like they showed up pretty early, the force fields and stuff.
I think definitely during Stan and Jack's run, but you're asking whether or not it's Stan's idea or if it's...
Sure.
Yeah, I know force fields showed up during Stan and Jack's run, but I think it was John Byrne that was just like, oh, actually, this is pretty powerful.
Yeah. You're talking about the actual power evolution. Yeah. That makes sense.
So the other thing I was reading about this today was Marvel, and specifically Jack and Stan, had been doing a lot of monster comics. It's just, that was what they were selling, like this is a different creature feature. We've read like Tales to Astonish. So this is not like out of the realm of what they were used to.
And we did the Hank Pym, the ant guy.
Yeah, exactly. And we did that Groot origin. So that's like what their kind of bread and butter was at that point. And Stan had been working at Marvel for 22 years at this point, and he was kind of bored by it. And his wife specifically asked him, he was kind of like bored with this job. And according to this book, his wife, who also recently passed, I think last year, she said...
No, it was about 4 or 5 years ago.
Okay. But she was saying, Stan, you put like all this work into... because he was doing like freelance ad copy and all these other things, like, and you're treating this Marvel Comics like it's just a day job. Like, why don't you like actually like put your like energies and passion into something at work? And he's like, okay. And he's like, finally, we don't have to do these stupid monster books anymore. And that's how he got like Jack on board. But then like you can see their monster comic pedigree is like out and out in this third segment. Like I can see like, I can see like a straight line of Marvel Comics from like that Groot comic. An Ant-Man comic to the Mole Man stuff. Like you can see it. Like, it's like it's like a straight line, which I hadn't really considered until I read it this time today. So it's interesting.
I love those monstery kind of comics. I can't say I've read much of the old stuff, but I always love it when they show up again and like get sort of deconstructed a little bit. Man,
well, he's making
monsters and like that pulpy stuff.
He makes fun of Fin Fang Foom. Like, I don't know if Fin Fang Foom just didn't exist in Marvel Comics before 74. Like, he obviously did, but wasn't being used again. Yeah, because like Stan calls him like a throwaway character. Like he's something that like is like hokey that he's like embarrassed by writing. In his
and it's the same way. Like aliens appear in the first year of Amazing Spider-Man, and then like 25 years later, they have to be like, oh no, it was actually God, what was that character that gave Black Cat her powers?
Oh yeah, I know. We've talked about this. I don't remember now, but yeah,
I don't remember either. Go ahead.
But they have to retcon it and be like, oh, it actually wasn't aliens. Don't worry. But it's the same thing where it's just like these sci-fi tropes where they're just like, who's Spider-Man gonna fight? And they're like, I don't know, aliens?
Well, also, it's funny. For a little while, a few years ago, I was kind of going through reading some of the old Marvel stuff chronologically from this era. And it's so funny how you would see Stan Lee like, oh, okay, there's a magnetic villain in the X-Men now. And also Thor's going to fight a magnetic villain. And now Iron Man's going to fight a magnetic villain. And, like, once he gets an idea, he's, I think, kind of starved for some of them, and so he starts using them in every book to kind of spread this idea around and really make it stretch. So, yeah, I think the Fantastic Four fought some aliens for sure, and so then everybody else fought an alien, of course. Makes sense.
Yep. So, yeah, it's interesting. It's also funny how many times the Mole Man came back. This is, I think, the first appearance of Monster Isle on the podcast. I love Monster Isle.
Yeah.
It's one of the sillier ideas in Marvel Comics, but it's come back a lot of times in Marvel Comics.
Doesn't the Thing say like bullshit? That thing doesn't exist.
Yes.
I like the origin of the Mole Man is also just like he's an ugly shut-in who stumbles upon Monster Isle and gets stuck there and becomes king. All right.
Well, I don't understand his origin. He's like, everybody thought it was ugly, so I wasn't appreciated on the surface world. But so I just decided to go to the inside of the world, to the center of the earth, where I would be king. And I'm like, yeah, that logic makes perfect sense, bro.
Yeah, and I became a real mole man. You're like, okay.
Just double down on that, okay, bro.
Might as well.
Yep. But yeah,
he's got a good design. I like his design though.
Yeah, I do like his design. But yeah, I do like that the thing is drawn to be like 8 feet tall. It's before Jack Kirby kind of settled down on his design a little bit. He sort of got a little friendlier and looks a little more like what we think of the thing to look like, where he's got kind of his, I would call them like eyebrows,
those rocky eyebrows.
Yeah, he sort of looks a little friendlier of what we think of the thing. He doesn't, like, right now he looks more like a golem.
Yeah. He doesn't draw the thing's face very much, I think because he knows that. And yeah, those few panels where it does show up, it's just like there's no defined head. It's just like kind of melting into his shoulders. And that's unsettling. Yeah. I don't want the thing to look like that.
Yeah, right now he's just a monster, and like that's kind of what's cool about him in these early appearances. And he kind of like you get like why he hates Reed Richards in these early appearances, because he's just like, why do I look like this?
Poor thing. Oh, that poor thing.
All right. So let's move on.
Well, let me say one last thing, though.
Yeah.
So my Origins of Marvel Comics, which I really like, if Stan Lee wrote a more contemporary issue of that book, then it was also published in here. So, like, it has issue 55 of Fantastic Four in here also to juxtapose against, which I think we covered like 56 or 57, like an issue right after that. But you can tell, like, immediately, like, Jack Kirby's art has gotten way more defined and way better.
Yeah.
Like, when you just look at them side by side, you're like, wow. Like, the designs are so much better. So it's just like, it was a really cool thing for me to see, like, here's where we started and here's where we are now. So that was a really cool thing to read. I mean, even though I was reading it 20 years later, but it was still really cool.
Yeah, we take for granted when, like, especially with these old ones, and it's like, oh, okay, issue 57. That's still one of those old ones from the 60s. But that's like 5 years of working on this. Like, you definitely see improvements throughout it.
Yeah. Well, and I also think, a lot of it, maybe some of it's Jack Kirby, but I think a lot of it is the inking and the coloring and all of that. Mm-hmm. Like, maybe some of it is Jack Kirby, but I think a lot of it is just, like, the general, like, the quality of what Marvel was putting out in that first issue, like, catching up to what Jack Kirby was capable of already. Like, I think he was already pretty damn good. And then them being like, oh, yeah, like, if we actually surround him with talent, he's really good.
Well, I think that's interesting the way that, like, Stan talked about, like, well, Jack was my boss when I started in the late 30s, early 40s. And, like, Jack, of course, was a superstar, like, that made, like, Captain America. Like, that's, like, and then, like, 20 years later, they're working on this. Like, that's crazy to me. I think that's just, like, I think about it, like, as a real, like, career thing. Like, oh, yeah, like, he was your rock star. And then he's just stuck around there for 20 years because, that's what you do. Although he came and went. And then Stan was, like, pretty much a lifer. But do you want to get into Amazing Fantasy 15?
Yeah, let's do it. So Amazing Fantasy, as you were mentioning, was one of these old, kind of an anthology comic. It would have a few different chapters that was just different stories each. So we're not going to be talking about all of the stories that are in Amazing Fantasy 15. We're only going to be talking about the Man in the Mummy case. About no, we're not. What is in this? There's, like, something about Martians. There's just these random little stories that were pretty much
five stories per issue.
Yeah. And so for this Amazing Fantasy 15, the first 2 chapters are dedicated to Spider-Man. And so it's not the length of a typical comic. It's about 14 pages, something like that.
Yeah, it's very brisk. But like Amazing Fantasy, which I always call them, like, a lot of these comics were like Twilight Zone books.
Yeah,
Stan called them O. Henry stories.
Yeah, for sure.
Which is probably a more accurate, reference.
Yeah,
for him,
it's like just little short stories with a quick twist ending.
Which again, I went into this cold. I probably had seen the image of Spider-Man, but I didn't know anything about him, and it blew my mind. To have that, like, kind of like Twilight Zone twist at the end, because I'd never seen anything like that at this point. Because Spider-Man, we know Spider-Man's origin. He becomes he's brash. He's got his powers,
right?
And then
the big twist at the very, very end is when it's like, oh no, this guy that I could have stopped is the one, and who just killed my uncle is the one I could have stopped way back when. And so that's the twist.
And it's like, and I remember reading that. I'm like, how is this guy possibly ever going to live with himself?
He's just going to put a gun in his mouth on the next page.
Well, probably. Because the thing is like Stan was saying, like, a lot of the superheroes, he didn't like teenage sidekicks. Although I think Rick Jones is a teenage sidekick for Hulk.
Oh yeah, the Teen Brigade. Come on,
and Captain America.
Yeah, and so he kind of like hated that concept of superhero comics having that. He says because to make people talk is even what's said in 1974. So I guess he was alluding to pedophilic homosexuality, I guess. But it was funny because he was like, with the Fantastic Four, he's like, I don't want to do any sidekicks. And then with Spider-Man, he's like, I want to focus it specifically on a teenager. And they were like, that's stupid. That's a dumb idea. And he's like, Amazing Fantasy is already canceled, guys. This is the last issue.
Yeah, just
like,
try it.
Let me throw it out there. Let's see. And he's like, we'll get Jack to do this. And then they were like, spiders are scary. And Jack also was like, I don't really have time for this bullshit. This is stupid. So they gave it to Ditko. I think Jack did draw up a treatment, and I guess I would love to see what Jack Kirby's Spider-Man treatment is, because it's probably not nearly as... I mean, Kirby's a genius, but Steve Ditko really did something special with this, like, Spider-Man design.
Well, and this is all Stan's version, right?
Oh, yeah. I've never seen this much, like, lack of hubris from Stan Lee as this 1974. Like, the myth is that Stan Lee did everything. Now, but even in the 70s, he was giving more credit to them than I was expecting.
Yeah, I mean, like, Jack's version, and his family sued not that long ago. Jack's version is that in the 1950s, he created a character called the Fly for Archie Comics, and that he designed basically Spider-Man based on that design and brought it to Stan Lee. And that he was like, I don't know, like a web gun, a magic ring that turns him into Spider-Man. I'm not really sold on this. And that he's like, we'll think about it. And that he basically said, we'll give Steve Ditko a chance to pitch, a design. And that Steve Ditko designed Spider-Man.
How interesting.
And so, if you believe that, then it's just like, oh, okay. Then Jack Kirby created the idea of Spider-Man in that he, created the concept of a character named Spider-Man. He brought the idea to Stan Lee, and then Stan Lee was like, I don't know about this version, and then gave Steve Ditko a different, and it was like, can you iterate on this concept? Steve Ditko iterated on it into what he did, and then created literally, one of the most iconic characters of the 20th century.
So that seems that doesn't line up with the facts that Stan Lee presented in this book, but it does line up with some of the cracks of Jack created something that was a little too fantastical, because Jack was just really good at coming up with like superheroes and big designs, and Steve was really good at like making it more grounded. And that seems to match up with your story, Chris, in a different way.
Yeah, like it does kind of make sense, doesn't it?
Yep.
That the Kirbys were like, well, Jack already had this in his back pocket, that he had the idea for a Spider-Man character.
I have a very important Spider-Man design question for the both of you. On the very last page of Amazing Fantasy number 15. Oh, shit. How did I get that wrong? Are there pupils in the eyes of Spider-Man's costume?
Yes, there are.
Yes.
It is unsettling. I don't like it. I don't like it at all, to the point that I almost want to make the screenshot for this episode like that picture, because it's so weird to see Spider-Man with eyes. That's all. That's all I have to say about the matter. I don't know if Jack Kirby drew those eyes or if Steve Ditko drew those eyes, but if whoever it is, I want to sue them.
It would be Ditko. I'm going to say my no prize explanation is that this is not his official costume. This is his wrestling costume.
That's true, yes. And he was in such shock, and his eyes grew so wide that even the mask couldn't hide them.
Yeah, and so because this isn't his real superhero crime fighting version, but his wrestler costume, that's why it looks all weird. He's got his blue spider on the back.
Oh yeah, how weird is it that he used his powers to become a pro wrestler? Vince, you were saying before we started, you showed us that screenshot of him going into the science exhibit. Like talking like a villain, being like, "Oh, I'll show you all." Like, fuck the world.
Before he even gets powers, he's just like, "These assholes are so mean to me." Flash Thompson has the second line of the entire book, and he's like, "These guys are so mean to me. I'll show them." And I'm like, "I don't know how you're going to show them, buddy, but you are." And he picks wrestling, and I actually really like the in-story reason for this, because in the movie, I think, the Raimi movie, he just picks wrestling because I don't know why, because it's been 15 years since I've seen that movie. But this one was like, okay, I'm going to put on a mask, and I'm going to test out my powers, and if I get the shit beaten out of me, well, that's okay, because I have a mask and no one will laugh at me, because they won't know it's me. And I'm like, that's a really...
It is pretty good, yeah.
I hadn't given that consideration to nerd Peter Parker. But Peter Parker talks like every single Spider-Man villain of like being like, or even Batman villain even. Like the system has like let him down, and he's a genius amongst all these Philistines, and he'll show them, and then like a freak accident happens to them, and then he like starts his like wave of crime. I've read this before.
I'm sure there's like a "What if Uncle Ben hadn't died" comic somewhere, but I feel like if Uncle Ben hadn't died, he would just have like stayed on this track and become a villain. Like
I think Dan Slott just wrote a book like that. It was like Amazing Spider-Man, like 1.5 and 1.2, 2.5, like in between the cracks of this, like within the last 5 years. I didn't read all of it, but there's definitely a villain that's got a very similar identity to Peter Parker that gets similar powers and then does go down a villain road.
There's also like in the universe where Gwen got bit and became Spider-Gwen. Like Peter Parker's the straight up villain in that, which I also enjoy very much.
Dude, he is like, I mean, like I had a lot of sympathy for this guy, and now I'm I'm like disgusted by Peter Parker in this book.
Yeah, bring on Miles Morales. Get him out of here.
He's like the only people I like are Aunt May and Uncle Ben, and the rest of the world can hang. Like that's literal words from Spider-Man.
Wait, did you say Ant-Man instead of Aunt May?
Possibly.
What if Aunt May was Ant-Man? That is what if I want to read.
Yeah. But
what if Ant-Man was bit by a radioactive Aunt May? That'd be hilarious too.
Oh my god! And he got the powers to communicate with Aunt May wherever he is.
The proportional strength of an Aunt May.
But to me, like that's why Spider-Man is Stan Lee's greatest creation, because he is a Steve Ditko character, but he's a Steve Ditko character who grows out of it, because he's like, oh, I'm an objectivist, but he grows out of being one.
Because Ditko was very much like in the Ayn Rand and selfishness.
Yeah,
right? Okay.
Exactly, because he, and there's a great, I think it's Comics Alliance article about how like the first like 125 or 150 issues of Spider-Man is such a great like metaphor about like a nerdy like introvert like becoming like a regular person. Like he like he has a girlfriend, like he gets friends, and like the people he used to bully him, like he gets along with, and he realizes like, oh, like these guys are okay, like I can just get along with them. If I, like it doesn't have to be this like blood feud, like I can just grow up, high school is over, Like,
I do feel like one of the great things that Marvel Comics did was like turn Flash Thompson into a character I really loved over the last 30 years.
Yeah.
I love Flash Thompson, especially has Venom these days. Last time I read him, great stuff.
He's got a really great Amazing Spider-Man 800 Kia. You'll love it. He's really good in it.
And I thought it was really stupid. And then, fortunately, the last, 15 or 20 years or so have fixed it. But one of the dumbest things John Byrne did, we talked about the good things he did for Invisible Woman. One of the dumbest things he did when he started writing Spider-Man in the late 90s was make Flash Thompson hate Peter Parker. It's like, what are you doing?
Yeah, he did revert a lot.
Again.
Yeah. But overall, I guess this Amazing Fantasy thing is pretty good. I'm curious to see where this Peter Parker character goes. Maybe he'll be successful.
I mean, I still think this is like, we've talked about this before, but now that we're actually here, this is like amazing efficiency in storytelling. It's like, Peter Parker's a loser. Peter Parker has powers. Peter Parker is going to be a wrestler. Peter Parker's on the Ed Sullivan Show. That's in 5 pages.
As I'm reading all these, I was thinking, could you imagine a modern comic being written like this?
Yeah. And it does, you do kind of get why J. Jonah Jameson is suspicious of Spider-Man, because he's like, that wrestler guy, he's a superhero? I just saw him on TV wrestling.
Mm-hmm.
I don't blame him.
Yeah, people who have wrestled in the ring and then, or just become reality TV show people, like, and then becoming heroes, you should be naturally suspicious of them.
Like if The Rock just started fighting crime, I'd be like, I don't know about that.
Yeah, this seems like a setup of some sort. This is like all part of his presidential campaign. Good stuff here. Let's move on to Avengers #1. Yeah?
Yep.
Let's do it. I think this one's even more packed than either of the other two. A lot of stuff happens. Although it's mainly like a Loki and Thor story with some other folks involved. Loki at this point has been banished to wherever. His giant face. So his giant face looks pretty cool on that first page. And his floating eyes are like watching everything. He's watching Thor. He's like, I got to get back into this. And so he says, I'm going to use Hulk to like get in. He tricks the Hulk into destroying a train. But the Hulk doesn't let that happen. He like sees what's going on.
It's pretty funny because like Hulk accidentally does destroy the train tracks, but then he's like, "Oh no, there's a train coming. Let me help it."
Yeah, and he uses like a giant boulder to make sure that the train can pass through. So the train doesn't crash or anything, but of course the media still spins it against the Hulk. They're like, "Oh, the Hulk tried
dishonest media.
Train. Can't trust them." And then you've got Rick Jones, teen sidekick, with the rest of the Teen Brigade. Did they ever get their own comic? They really should have.
I do know like around Runaways, Rick Jones did lead like a group of like former teen superheroes like trying to get the Runaways out of it.
Did I remember?
The Loners? Was it Rick Jones or was it was definitely Phil Urich was involved. Who was briefly not evil because then he became evil. He was because he was the Green Goblin and Ben Urich's nephew. He also had an Uncle Ben. And then he tried to get the Runaways out of it. He's like, we're former teen heroes. Whatever, the Teen Girl Squad, the Teen Brigade.
Great. So Teen Brigade, Teen Girl Squad, they're like,
no.
We can't let this media spin all this bad stuff against Hulk. We have to contact the Fantastic Four. So they use their little like ham radios that are hanging out there, and they try to contact the Fantastic Four. This segment is the best. Loki reroutes their call because he's like, I don't want the Fantastic Four involved. I just want Thor. So he reroutes the call to Thor. But while it's going to Thor, Ant-Man and the Wasp hear it. Iron Man hears it. Everybody else hears this damn thing. And so they're in now. And then, like, eventually the Fantastic Four...
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, you continue.
The Fantastic Four get the message too, but they're like, "Hey, Rick Jones, we got your call. We're busy, but according to my calculations, some other people got your call too, so you'll be okay."
That's a great what if. I don't know if that's ever been written. Is what if the Fantastic Four had heard the Team Brigade's call? Would there be no Avengers?
What if no Avengers?
Oh shit! Or no, what if the Fantastic Four joined up with the Avengers all together on that first one?
I do want to say
299 issues too soon.
Everybody's an Avenger. Thank you, Bendis. I do love that Donald Blake looks exactly like Chris Hemsworth in the Ghostbusters movie.
Ooh.
Wait, I feel like it's worth mentioning for people just like coming into this now. Yeah, Thor used to have a secret identity. It was Donald Blake, who's maybe a separate person. I don't fucking know anymore. He was a doctor. That's all that matters.
Well, it was
he like hit a little stick that turned him into Thor.
Yeah. We've talked about it before, but it's like it's worth mentioning again for people who are like, "Who's Donald Blake? What are we talking about?" Because I sometimes forget as well. I'm like, "Oh yeah,
they did away with that." Was it Simonson that did away with that? We read that where they were just like,
yeah.
At that point, he didn't have a secret identity anymore.
I think they just killed Donald Blake. It's like he's Thor all the time now. Just deal with it.
By that point, it was revealed that he didn't have. It's like Odin was like, Donald Blake didn't exist. That was a trick.
Oh, it was a trick. So there are a lot of tricks in this book. Loki. Like all the these new Avengers folks. I'm calling them the Avengers, but they're not yet. But they're just hanging out.
The new Avengers, circa.
Yeah, they're not any Avengers at all. They're the pre-Avengers, and they're hanging out. They're like, "What are we gonna do about this Hulk thing?" And Thor gets distracted by Loki pretending to be the Hulk, and so he just runs off after him. Meanwhile, the Hulk is hiding out at a circus. But he cannot hide from the ant informant.
That might be my panel of the week. That was so stupid. I love it. It was just the stupidest thing I've ever seen in my life. Because it was like he's gonna let this blow over. I don't actually have a screen grab of it, but it is positively the dumbest thing I've ever seen.
It's a little arrow. Like the Hulk is lifting up a giant cage that is filled with like the rest of the fucking show with lions jumping around and shit. And there's a little arrow pointing to this ant that says, "But unnoticed by the Hulk, one tiny ant watches his act. And then, at last, one of my army of ants has seen an impossibly powerful performer in a local circus. It could be the Hulk."
that ant is a narc. But it's just like, where's like it's like in the Avengers movie where like Hulk like gets thrown off and then like where's Hulk for the rest of this battle? Oh, he'll take some time to get here. No, Hulk is hiding in a circus so the Avengers don't find him. Like somehow he got employment, pretending to be a robot. With this,
like it happened so fast. And can I just congratulate the Hulk on this face paint that he has that makes him look like a sad clown? It is
like this is a cut for no one. He looks like Roger Moore, James Bond in Octopussy when he became a clown. That's those of y'all who have in the Venn diagram of comic book listeners who have stuck with us for 93 episodes, mixed with James Bond fans of the let's say 17th James Bond movie. It's not the 17th, it's probably the 14th. But y'all like appreciate that joke. It was a bad moment.
Yep. So yeah, he is impersonating. He's like, as long as people think I'm a robot, they won't suspect I'm the Hulk.
And then Ant-Man also, by the way, it's Hank Pym, not Paul Rudd, Scott Lang, who like constantly negs the Wasp for no good reason. He calls her like a dumb woman for powdering her nose, and
she keeps flirting with Thor.
Well, it's fucking Thor, wouldn't you?
Mm-hmm. I would.
I guess so.
Like if I was with Aquaman or if I was with Thor, the plot would be derailed. At least my part.
It's also worth mentioning at this point. Hank Pym has, I think, recently lost his wife. And Jan is kind of filling that void, but he doesn't know how to deal with women yet. He's not back on the scene. He's just hating everything.
He's like, you gotta powder your nose. I would like. He's like, why can't I use my wings? No, you're flying these ants because I don't want you exhausted because you're a weak woman.
I supposed to skip right over that. Oh my god, that's horrible.
He's real. He's super neggy to her. But I do love the Ant-Man plot. Is like, well, we'll just get all the ants to create a sinkhole underneath Hulk, and that's how we'll catch him. And even Hulk's like, yeah, that was pretty impressive. That was pretty good. Well done. I appreciate it.
He says, what am I gonna do? I'll jump out. Good plan.
It is a definitely like Superman and his amazing friends situation where it's just like it's just Thor and his pals.
Mm-hmm.
Where it's just like it's just Thor, guys.
Like Thor is handling he's handling like the real important stuff. He goes to Odin for whatever reason. He's like, I gotta find Loki, and they do their fight. There's some cool goblins around. A troll. I like that troll. He's like unsettling.
That's a cool design.
Yeah.
That hand is real gross.
It's like too big, and like he's just oddly proportioned. Yeah, love that guy. So the troll.
I don't love that guy. His hand is like twice the size of his body.
Yeah, that's why I love him. Take it up with Jack Kirby. Yeah, I love him because I hate him, and I hate him because I love him. The troll gets vanquished. Loki is like, oh, I'm a million people. No, I'm just one person, using his tricks and stuff. Gets beaten. Meanwhile, Iron Man and the Hulk are fighting in a factory for some reason. I don't know.
They're just jumping back and forth, chasing each other.
Yeah, there's tires flying around everywhere. It's okay, I guess. But then Thor shows up with Loki and says, hey, this guy was really the one who was doing everything, and I caught him. So let's all become a team.
Well, specifically, Janet does.
That's right.
Well, actually, it's Hank who says, me and Janet were talking, and we think we should be a team. Because he can't even let her have her own moment. And I do remember, like, nerds, like, in 2012, like, how could you form the Avengers without the Wasp? She's the one who put the whole team together. And then I read this, and I'm like, it was a line not even spoken by her. That's just... And I'm giving a straw man
it was
argument.
her idea.
Yeah, I know.
She named it. It should be something colorful and dramatic, like the Avengers.
Like was just really Stan Lee was in England and saw like, hey, the Avengers. That's a really cool name for Emma Peel, John Steele show. I'll steal it because it'll never come over to America.
I got so confused as a young child when I saw that there was a live-action Avengers show, and I wanted to check it out, and it was nothing like this.
Stan thought that the name would not carry over in another English-speaking country. Like, literally. He just thought it was a cool name and thought, like, they'll never know about a show in all the way. No, they're not. I mean, Thor does say like something like, "Loki, you're so stupid. You think you could do this, and I wouldn't avenge it." And I'm like, "Well, at least you tried to fit something in."
But even the Hulk joins before he like quits the next issue or like 4 issues or whatever.
Yeah, the next issue I'll spoil it for you because I read it and I made a reference to it. A alien from space swaps bodies with people and throws people into limbo. He swaps bodies with every member of the Avengers and throws their bodies into limbo. He tries to do it to Thor, but when he does, you can guess what happens. Thor's too powerful. He throws that guy's body into limbo, and so he's stuck in limbo until somebody wants to swap bodies with him. So that's the end of him.
So still just a Thor book.
Yep.
Cool.
So
But Hulk quits the team because he's like, when that guy swapped bodies, I could hear everything you were saying. You were really mean.
Oh, poor Hulk.
So I read this book. I think Marvel was reprinting the Avengers books with like new digital coloring. I could be wrong about the new coloring, but they've definitely reprinted the classic Avengers, like starting with issue 1, and then would have like backup stories with by Mike Oeming from like Powers. Mm-hmm. And I bought that first issue, and I was like, yeah, I'm gonna read like some old Avengers because I just gotten into comics at that time, and I was like, this sucks. I hate this.
It's hard to read, yeah.
And you know what? This time, totally delightful. I loved it. This is the exact kind of stupid I like from a comic book. Like the stuff about like the Teen Brigade being like, oh, we meant to call the Fantastic Four. It's like, well, too fucking bad. Us other heroes heard it. We're gonna do this.
It's definitely a book that has more context when you've been reading more stuff from this era. It just it is. Like it's similar to the Fantastic Four annual that we read, where it's like, yeah, everybody's here. Why not? They're just like doing their shit, Let's just go with it. We'll do some dumb shit. It'll be great.
Well, because the way Stan talked in the Son of Origins of Marvel Comics, he was like, well, we were gonna make another superhero book, and we were thinking we should probably have another team, like the Avengers, or the X-Men, which we just came up out of the air. But the people were like, I want to see more Thor, and I want to see more Iron Man. And why don't they just team up? Because we always want like Spider-Man and Daredevil to team up. Why can't the those heroes team up? And Stan's like, this is good. I don't have to do any work. I'll just make up this idea. That's cool. And he was like, how about Iron Man and Hulk and Thor? And you know what? Ant-Man and Wasp aren't getting any love. Let's throw them in there just to see what happens. And I'm sure that was the extent of the thought that happened. It's like, oh, cool. People want this. I don't have to think. Jack, go draw this. And Jack had to come up with everything else.
Yeah. Which is funny because it's literally the Justice League idea where his like famous golfing with Martin Goodman story where he's like, just take the popular characters and put them together. It's like, yeah, just take Iron Man and Thor and blah blah blah, and just throw them together. It's like, yeah, that's the thing.
I mean, I think the New Avengers doesn't necessarily make sense, but I also understand from a storytelling perspective, but from Mark Millar's storytelling perspective or business perspective, he's like, I bought Justice League because it had more heroes I knew in one book, and when I can only buy one book a month, I'm not gonna buy just a Batman book. I'll get Batman and Superman and Green Lantern all in one book. That's cool.
Yeah.
So if I could buy a book that has Wolverine and Spider-Man and Captain America and Thor and Iron Man, I'm going to do that rather than just buy a Captain America book or a Spider-Man book. I'm like, that makes total sense from me as a purchaser, even though, the stories didn't work out as well. But and it kind of, I agree with classic Avengers, but New Avengers from a budget standpoint as a customer, I'm like, that makes sense to me.
Yeah, it's like a kid staring at the comic book stand, and his mom says you can only get one. What are you gonna get?
Yeah,
the one with everybody.
That was me. The one with everybody. Marvel team up. You get different people.
Yeah, Spider-Man, and one of his friends.
Yeah. So good stuff. Are we done with Avengers? I think it's time to move on to Secret Wars. Yeah. So Stan Lee, thank you for everything you did. Thank you for everything you stole. I don't care about the lawsuits. It was good stuff, and we're happy that it happened.
The lawsuit's settled.
Oh, it's settled. Good. I'm glad that things have settled down. Wonderful. So on to our continued read of Secret Wars #3. I feel like we've been reading this thing for a long time just because we took that big break between 1 and 2.
Two-month break, yeah.
This is a long war. War is hell, you guys. War is hell.
That's no secret. That's no secret.
What is going on here in Secret Wars? We have Magneto, who's just gotten back from kidnapping the Wasp. There's a big storm going on outside. I thought they were talking about storm at first, like creating some weather stuff. No, it's just a storm.
Because he threw the Wasp in a giant metal ball at the end of issue 2.
Yeah, and there's like some creepy stuff where he's just like, listen, you live here with me now. What are you going to do about it? I don't like it. It gets creepier later where he just decides to make out with her and she doesn't like fight it.
She fights it for a little while, but not enough.
Not enough at all. Like, I don't know where this is going. That's pretty much all we get out of that storyline for this issue. But
she's into it.
Like, that bothered me. That's the only part of this book I didn't like. Now let's keep on going because the rest of this book is fucking great. Or maybe not. I don't know. Thor is like smiling, trying to ward off this meteor shower that's hitting their base. That smile on his face. I like this art. Who did the art for this? Michael Zeck, right?
Mike Zeck of Kraven's Last Hunt fame.
Good job, Mike Zeck. I like your Thor face. And Jim Shooter, I think, does a good job of balancing the writing for all these different characters and sort of giving them all their own moments. I think it feels pretty easy to keep track of everything, especially when we haven't read an issue in a long time. But yeah, the heroes are hanging out at their base. They're doing their thing. Reed Richards is sad because Sue is pregnant and he wants to be at home. We've got the X-Men having discussion about what to do because all the other Avengers that are hanging out there, they're all racist and they hate mutants.
Yeah, this is not Spider-Man's highest point.
Spider-Man is he's spying on the X-Men, and Professor X says, "All right, that's settled. We're going to join Magneto." And we don't know what the whole plan is. Neither does Spider-Man, but Spider-Man says, "Whoa, I've heard enough," and decides to attack them.
Yeah, he's like, "I'm narking on you right now."
But why? Immediately after this, he runs to go tell Reed Richards what happened. Why wouldn't you just go do that instead of making your presence known by attacking them and then running away? Just run away. What are you doing, man? Anyways, as he's running away, Professor X makes him forget about all that with a mind wipe. Classic move. Has Professor X done a lot of mind wipes? I don't know. I feel like we don't see that very often out of the good guys. Maybe I'm just thinking about.
Yeah, I was thinking about that. I was like, I think Cyclops probably later would think like, has he ever done that to me?
Yeah.
I do notice that somebody put another page. Oh, Diana's waking up. Okay.
Oh, Diana, little Wonder Woman waking up.
Yeah, little Wonder Woman's just chilling with me because it's past her bedtime, but she needs to go to sleep. Anywho, they're like, man, Professor X, now that he can't walk, he's getting a little too big for his britches. Or now that he can walk, they're like, man, he thinks he can lead shit and mind wipe everybody. What a motherfucker.
Yeah.
I'm like, it's just funny to me.
The other thing that I really like is supervillains talking to each other on giant TV screens, which this book has, which is Magneto and Doctor Doom just talking to each other. And Doctor Doom's face is so much larger than it needs to be, and I love it. If FaceTime was like that, I would actually talk to people. Wouldn't that be great?
I love how animated Doctor Doom's face is when he's like, "You're gonna regret not joining me, Magneto. I'm gonna go over there and I'm gonna kill you, dude."
And Doctor Doom, meanwhile, has this experiment going on with a couple of ladies that he's augmenting with powers. Yeah, we don't actually know where they come from. Even some of the other villains are like, "Where'd they come from?" And I wouldn't put it past Doctor Doom to make some robots. But one of them is Titania. I didn't realize this was her origin here. Skeeter McPherson, aka Titania. I don't know.
Titania, whatever, however you say her name. And Volcania.
Yeah, I don't really know much about Volcana. But she's got some fire powers. Titania is some strength stuff. We've got a nice scene of her flirting with Absorbing Man, which is nice because they do become a couple and manage to stay a couple. I think, as far as I know, still are. I think they might be my favorite supervillain couple in Marvel Comics.
Yeah, I like their really awkward flirting where she's just like challenges him to a fight, and he's just like, no.
It's good stuff. And the Wrecker is like, I'll fight you with my lips. And, out of here, man. You're gross. Volcano's talking to the Molecule Man, who says that he's been seeing a therapist ever since the Avengers convinced him not to destroy the Earth, which is, I think, also some pretty bad flirting.
Yep. Classic Avengers issue where Tiger was like, why are you doing this? And basically just talked Molecule Man out of his plan, and he's like, you're right. I don't know why I'm doing this.
Yeah, there should be more talking out of the plans. I think I like that. We also see that the heroes have, from that last fight, they captured a lot of the bad guys. You had Kang and the rest of the Wrecking Crew. They're all in stasis. Enchantress is in a healing pod, and Thor goes to talk to her about some Asgardian god stuff. I don't think we find out exactly what it was. Do we? No. He's just like, hey, I got to talk to you about some stuff that these mortals wouldn't understand, so let's talk. Hulk is getting dumber. Hulk, has been his kind of smarter self, but he's getting more like enraged.
He used a big word though. I can't remember what it was from my notes, but he said some fairly insightful things in this issue.
He did, but then like little by little, his like emotions are starting to get the best of him, and we're kind of seeing that in his thought bubbles. So I don't remember how that comes into play, but I'm guessing this is gonna cause him to revert. And then, like, the last couple of pages happened really, really quickly. I blinked and I missed it. Vince, I think you literally said you swiped your thumb on accident and it was over.
And then it went to, like, hey, it's time for issue 4. And I'm like, wait, what?
Yeah.
Like, it just was going and it didn't even seem like it was building towards a cliffhanger.
Yeah, like, the villains, like, kind of attacked the base. She-Hulk is out. Volcano puts her down. Dr. Octopus puts down Photon. Is that her name? What's she going by?
Captain Marvel at the time.
Yeah. And next thing you know, like these other bad guys who were in stasis at the heroes base have been freed. And I don't think we actually saw that happen. It's a lot of narration, but actually not a lot of narration. It just happens.
And like Captain America and Thor and Iron Man and all the other heroes like run away.
I'm very confused by what happened. This issue seems like it ran out of pages. Like, oh, I gotta end this? All right, we're done.
Right. Not enough Doctor Doom as far as I'm concerned. Even though he was there, he didn't say any like good like one-liners.
He gave. Yeah, I know he's your favorite for these things, but he did give a couple of ladies some cool powers, and I think that's true. That.
And he does, his final line of the issue is, there's less casualties than I'd like.
No, he says...
That was going to be my sign-off. Thank you very much, Chris.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you, Vince. And I'd say, we also had fewer kills than I'd hoped.
Yeah.
Well,
but no matter, we've accomplished much here today. That'd be my sign-off.
Yeah, maybe we'll just make that our regular sign-off if I ever decide to have any sort of a regular sign-off instead of improvising something weird.
I think this one did have a la-dee-da from Janet Van Dyne, also the Wasp.
Oh man, this book, I like, even though I've read it before, I just cannot remember where any of this is going at all. But it's still just like, it's fun to read. Crazy stuff is happening. I liked it. I continue to like it. I'm still also directly comparing it to Crisis on Infinite Earths. And every time I read anything in this, I'm just like, God, how did Crisis on Infinite Earths fuck it up so much?
Well, this one seems much more focused as like, well, there's bad guy fort and good guy fort. And they're gonna fight, and then some people in the good guy fort want to be bad guys, and some guys in the good and bad guy fort want to be good guys. And they're, it's like, okay.
Magneto's got his own fort too, and it's just like, I like that. I like that Magneto's got his own fort.
Yeah, and it's even good. Like Magneto and Galactus as like wild cards. Yeah, it's like having the sort of third parties. Like that's complicated enough. We get it.
It's like there are so many characters going on around here, but they've all got their own kind of thing that's going on, and if they don't, you kind of know that they're not that important. They're just like part of the bunch. And this group does a good job of like identifying the people that you need to worry about for this issue and like kind of know what's going on with them, and the people who are just like, yeah, they're just part of the crew. It's fine.
Yeah, you don't need to know like, oh, like what's the Wrecking Crew's internal monologue?
Right. They don't matter. And it made me think more about Crisis and how, like, we did talk about how very samey it got with a lot of the heroes fighting each other off. But at least in this book, like, we see all the heroes doing their own different thing, even if it is, like, not action packed or whatever. It's important. It gives us, like, I want to, like, do a mashup of Secret Wars and like a Crisis on Secret Infinite Wars.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think Crisis. I mean, I think we obviously went into Crisis. This is probably a good time to mention that the CW recently announced that all of its Arrowverse shows, like the Flash and Arrow, and I don't think Legends of Tomorrow is involved, but Supergirl, which are all having a Crisis on Infinite Earths. That's going to be their big event next year. Because they do frequently, every season they do a crossover where all the shows from the CW crossover, and
I love that idea. I love that they do that. I might have to start like getting.
I know.
Into these.
The problem is like then I have to like watch like 5 seasons of Arrow,
right,
and like 4 seasons of Flash to try to figure out what's going on.
And I'm not into that.
I'm not into that either. But the Flash has already done like some alternate universe stuff where they've already done some crossovers with the previous Flash TV series of the 90s. Where that Flash came into this universe, and I'm thinking like, man, they could do some really cool stuff with the CW series. They could bring back like Smallville, and try to bring in some, you know what I'm saying? Like they could do some really cool things.
Somebody save me!
I was texting Chris, and I was like, man, if they brought like Batman TAS. And those, just like how like Spider-Ham is in Spider-Verse, if they just had like one sequence where like Batman TAS...
Wait, Spider-Ham is in I can't believe you spoiled that shit.
He's in the trailers. He's in the trailers. In a different animation style, by the way.
I generally don't watch trailers, so I don't know.
Oh, yeah. So, like in the year of our Lord, Spider-Ham is a McDonald's toy right now. I know, right? It's crazy. It's crazy. McDonald's. I know, right? But I was thinking like, I think that you could do a really clean Crisis on Infinite Earths with just like a bunch of alternate universe versions of the Flash and Supergirl, which I think technically takes place in a different universe than the rest of the Arrowverse shows. But they have their own Batman. If they had like a mild crossover with that Gotham TV show, I mean, you could do some real stupid stuff and it'd be fun.
Yeah, I still can't believe that Crisis the comic focused on so many of the least important characters. Man, all right.
They gave us a Superman origin.
And it's been so much time with like characters that it pretended it was going to focus on, like that.
I'm
like
never
that Wildcat, like that Wildcat character.
Hating this Crisis on Infinite Earths. All
right. And at the end of the day, you're like, what was the point of that Wildcat character? Like, who cares about Wildcat?
What was issue 3 of Marvel Secret Wars called though? It was like Shots Fired at Crisis. Like Crisis is in the title.
Oh yeah, Tempest Without, Crisis Within. Deep stuff. So that's our episode, I guess. Oh, what are we doing next time? What are we doing next time? I gotta check my notes.
It's Death Month. Death Month is back.
Not enough death in this issue for us, so we're getting some death in the rest of them. Death Month.
January.
All the month of January. Death in the Family by Batman. No, not by Batman. Batman didn't write.
I mean, Joker caused the death in the family, but that's okay.
Yes. Jim Starlin wrote this. Art by Jim Aparo. Covers by Mike Mignola, our old friend. This is Batman 426 through 429. Spoiler alert. What?
It's only 4 issues?
Yeah, only 4 issues. Okay. This is very famously the death of Jason Todd, the second Batman. Second Robin. God, Christ. Batman's all over the place. I'm fucked up. Batman wrote this comic where the second Batman dies, and this is the one where people could call in to vote on who dies. So, call in to the podcast and let us know if, I don't know.
You want Jason Todd to die?
Yeah, I guess so. We'll see if it still happens. Please be sure to go to McDonald's. They're our sponsors. Buy a Happy Meal. Get yourself a Spider-Ham toy and a Spider
hamburger. Oh, my God.
Good. I'm glad we both made that joke. Boy. We will join you next time. Also, Secret Wars 4. That'll be good. Boy, I'm blanking here. Vince, Chris, anything else we got to mention? Chris, what's going on with your stupid minds?
Well, we have an episode that should be coming out. I don't know if it'll be out by the time this episode drops. About a mermaid who is small. It is a bad movie that I do not recommend anyone watch.
It's not The Little Mermaid?
It may or may not be a Little Mermaid.
Is it The Little Mermaid 2 Return to Sea?
No.
Is it Aquaman?
No. It is not a Disney property. It is a movie made not by Disney. It is a public domain property.
That sounds great. I can't wait.
That anyone can make and put online.
Chris, did y'all do Santa with Muscles by chance, since we're in the holidays?
We have done that in the past, and so it's a previous episode. It's a classic episode.
Executive produced by the Wolf of Wall Street guy from real life.
Yes, what? Jordan Belfort, classic episode that I would recommend everyone check out if you want to see an episode we've done in the past. A holiday episode that I would recommend. Santa with Muscles.
Right. Oh, speaking of which, is this our last episode before Christmas?
Yes.
Wow. Merry Christmas, or Merry whatever other holiday you celebrate. I
think it's our last day before New Year's, also.
Wow. Well,
we missed Hanukkah, but happy Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, Happy Kwanzaa. Kwanzaa will happen in this time. So.
2018's over. All right, cool. Welcome to 2019. We'll see you in. Well, hey, I have a good joke. We'll see you next year. All right, bye.
Wait, you didn't tee me up for my sign-off.
Oh, Vince, I'll see you next year.
Well, we also had fewer kills than I'd hoped, but no matter. We've accomplished much here this year.
We're done. Bye.